name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Okay. How many people have read this book, If You Love Me? Okay, great. It's Father Matthew the Poor. He's one of my favorites. I don't know which way's front. He's one of my favorites. He's kind of a local legend in the Coptic Church. He passed away in 2008. Very deep spiritual man. Was head of the St. Macarius Monastery, and he instituted a kind of monasticism that was different from the other monasteries. His was very a lot more ascetic, a lot less clerical. So, like, for example, none of the monks in his monastery are priests. He'll have like maybe 2 or 3 priests, and the other 150 monks are not priests. They're nothing. They just come and they're just monks. A lot of them aren't even deacons. I went there and served once, and I was, in my black, and I see these abunas, and I'm like, you go first, and they're like, I'm not even an absaltos, and he's a monk, right? He's just a monk. And that was sort of his MO. And so his approach to Christianity is one that it really resonates with me, which is the difficult approach, the difficult road, which is, the verse that Christ said, Christianity is about denying yourself, carrying your cross, and following him, right? And this is really the work of Christianity. Everything else, to me, is kind of fluff, right? Other than that's the real work. And that's the real work of being a servant. That's the real work of being a parent. That's the real work of being a spouse. That's the real work of being a child. That's the real work of being a friend. That's the real work, right? Is the work on the self. It's fighting against me. So everything, the way he approaches everything takes that perspective, right? It isn't a perspective of, what's the most effective way about, no. Like, we're going to talk about service. No, I'm not going to talk about audio visual and make it relatable to kids. No, that's not what service is. Service is war on the self, right? And that's how I serve, right? Being a spouse is war on the self, and that's how you become a spouse. Being a parent is war on the self, and that's how you become a good parent, right? And this is always his approach, right? And it's just it's a paradigm. It's a glass through which he views the world. And once you read a lot of his books, one of his more famous books, the one I highly recommend you all read, is called Grain of Wheat, which, how many people have read Grain of Wheat? It's a classic book, right? Very, very small, little pamphlet. Google it. You'll find it on the web. There'll be a PDF somewhere. It changes your whole perspective on what this is that we're doing, right? What Christianity is and what it isn't. And it just kind of brings you back to the roots of, what are we trying to do here? So let's go back to this book, If You Love Me, right? And right off the back, the title, everyone knows where the title comes from. This is something, he said to Peter, right? If you love me, and who knows how to finish it? Feed my sheep, right? That's what he said to Peter. If you love me, feed my sheep. And he asked Peter 3 times, do you love me? And the direction of that is very important. If you love me, then feed my sheep, right? The direction is because you can't feed if you don't love, right? You can't give what you don't have. You can't describe what you haven't experienced, right? Then it just becomes shallow, empty words, right? Then it's just a bad Sunday school lesson, right? Now it's like, hey, this is what you should do. You should pray a really long time. And then you're like, hey, uncle, do you pray a really long time? And they're like, no, but you should. And it's just like, do you love me? Then feed my sheep. Okay. All right, so I'll give you the summary of the introduction here. He focuses on this verse. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And then he draws this distinction between the difference between a religious teacher and a spiritual servant. And look at the difference. A religious teacher, which a lot of us think, that's sort of what Sunday school is. I become a teacher of religion. And a spiritual servant. He says the first relays information and the second builds souls. And so as we enter the service, we have to think about what it is we're trying to accomplish. Am I just trying to teach kids things they can Google, to be frank, right? And even thinking about the whole Sunday school apparatus that we have, right? We have to think about what is Sunday school, what is it? What is it supposed to be doing? Well, it's a information delivery system, right? It delivers information. And it came about in a time when there was no information, right? There's a lot of ignorance. In the 1950s in Egypt, a lot of ignorance, not a lot of books in the country. Pope Shenouda Nazir Gayed got together and he pulled together some books, right? And they put them all in one central location. You'd have to take your bus, go to the central location, read the book, write it down in your little nota, right? Take your notas, go to some other place, and then read what it said, right? Bad information dissemination, but that's what you have when that's the technology and the resources you have, right? We still use that approach, right? Someone gets the curriculum, writes it down, and then reads it. We have Google now. We have AI, right? We have no lack of knowledge. That's the problem. We have too many books, too many sermons, too many podcasts, too many ways to get religious information. Nobody needs religious information. There's plenty of that, right? I want to learn about anything in the church. I can have it at my fingertips in seconds. I don't need to hear a second-rate lesson on Council of Nicaea. I can get a better one on the internet, right? So then what is the purpose of Sunday school, right? Well, now if it's not information dissemination, then what does it need to become? Well, it needs to become the same model that Christ used. What did Christ do? Discipleship, right? What did St. Anthony do? Discipleship. What did the fathers do? Discipleship. What is the model of orthodoxy from the very beginning of time? From what Christ instituted? Discipleship. Right? So Sunday school needs to become that, not information dissemination. The first extracts knowledge from books and places it before the students on paper. The second feeds the one he serves from his own. I should just go back there because I don't want to keep turning, Sorry, phones. Let's just do this. Okay. I'll just have to yell a little bit more. You guys can forgive me. All right, the second one feeds the ones he serves from his own fullness. See the difference? So when I read a lesson and I read a book and I tell you about this book I read, that's a book report. That's nothing. That doesn't impact anybody. That doesn't change lives, right? Does anyone remember what happened on the day of Pentecost? What happened? Holy Spirit came down, tongues of fire, cool. Then what? How'd the rest of the day go? They had a bonfire, roasted marshmallows at the beach. What went on afterwards? Anyone remember? Anyone read it? It's a good story. Right? Peter gave a sermon. Does anyone remember the sermon Peter gave? So we need to read our Bibles every once in a while, or just listen when it's read at church. So Peter gave a sermon, and how many people were converted the day Peter gave the sermon? Anyone remember? 3,000 people. That means may God destroy your houses, literally. 3,000 people were converted the day Peter gave that sermon. And 3,000 people were baptized that day. Okay? Has anyone, I'm not even going to ask, but has anyone read the sermon that Peter gave? Okay? You should go read it. It's in the book of Acts. It's really lovely. Okay? But when you read the sermon, okay, so you know what happened on the day of the Pentecost, right? They were filled with the Holy Spirit. Fire. Right? Good things. And Peter gives this sermon, and 3,000 people were converted. When you read the sermon that Peter gave, it's not that good, right? It's just kind of, I think I've given better talks than that one, to be honest, right? I read it, I've given way better talks than this. And nobody gets converted when I give a talk. So then, what's up? Why did 3,000 people say, I want to be baptized right now? It's the Holy Spirit. What is that? Come on in, guys. Welcome. So what was the difference between Peter's sermon and the one I gave? He was filled with fire. And so he changed people's lives, not because of what he said, but because of who he is and who he was and how he said it. He impacted them. So service isn't about saying a bunch of words. Service is about impact. Impact comes from this sentence. The second one feeds the ones he serves from his own fullness. If you're not giving off what you are coming out of you, and you're just giving off what came out of somebody else's book, and I'm reading someone else's book, it's not going to have any impact. No one's going to care. They're just going to stare at you and you say, I'm going to forget this lesson in about 14 seconds as soon as this lesson's over, right? And the saddest part of Sunday school, right? The saddest part is when I walk the halls and the lessons start ending, right? And I watch the doors fly open, and what are the kids doing? Running out of there like they just got out of jail, right? And they're so happy to leave. And I'm like, wow, we failed miserably today. That 20 kids would go running out of a room and can't wait to get out of there. He shares the inner riches of his own faith, his own love, his own self-sacrifice, and his own humility. He provides genuine experiences and a living example to those he serves, for it is himself that he gives, and it is his own life that he offers. There it is. What am I offering the kids? The curriculum out of the curriculum app that I'm going to read to them? No, I offer me. My own sacrifice, my own love, my own heart, me. So what is the offering? It's an offering. It's not a lesson. I don't teach anything. I don't teach anybody. I offer myself, right? And when I offer myself with my own heart, people are moved because they see God working in me. They don't see me. I don't matter. But they see what God can do. And they get touched by that. That's why Peter gives a sermon and 3,000 people say, I'm with that guy. I want what he's having. Right? And when I give a talk, people are just like, is it over? This is the religious teacher. The first transmits words and concepts that he heard externally. The second brings forth words and concepts from within. An outpouring that rises from his depths like lava erupting from the depths of the earth. Look at the wording. When something comes from the heart, you can feel it. You can tell. And that's why a lot of you can't remember any of the lessons you heard, including what happened on the day of the Pentecost. Hagatiksif, you know what that means? Something embarrassing. Something to be embarrassed. But you can remember servants who spoke from the heart. You can remember a servant who loved you. You can remember a servant who cared. You can remember a servant who took an interest. You can remember a servant who changed your life. And you can't remember any of the lessons they gave. And that's the way it should be. Nobody remembers the lessons you give. And when you start serving, trust me, no one's going to remember the lessons you give, including this one that I'm giving right now. Probably the only thing you remember from this lesson is you won't remember any of the lessons you heard. The first prepares a lesson to convince his listeners. The second labors to give birth to children in Christ. That's discipleship. If it's just a bunch of kids and I don't really care and I'm not really thinking about them and I don't really worry about them, then it's not from the heart. I'm not giving birth, as St. Paul says, to children in Christ. These have to be my kids, right? And and I'm giving them a part of me. And I don't just give a part of me to anybody. Right? I give it to somebody that's special to me. He says, the lesson of love, and by the way, this is just cut and paste. This is just straight up plagiarism. The lesson of love can never be taught simply by prearranged words and anecdotes. Rather, it is taught by truly giving yourself and communicating the love and longing for Christ to those you serve. The lesson of humility cannot be taught by intellectual persuasion, but only by a prolonged and bitter struggle against one's ego. Did you hear that? That second bullet? You want to give a lesson on humility? Cut the crap. Don't give me a bunch of words. Don't tell me a bunch of verses. Don't tell me, a father once said. Be humble. You want to teach your kids about humility? Disciple it. Teach them what humility looks like. Teach them what humility sounds like. Teach them what humility feels like. You can tell when someone's humble. Right? You can tell when someone's giving a talk and you're like, that guy's full of himself, just like Archie, right? That guy thinks he's hot stuff. And it just kind of disgusts you. You're like, I don't want to hear this talk. This person's prideful, spouting out stuff, trying to impress me, trying to make me feel bad about myself, trying to show how much he or she knows. Not interested. I don't want to be talked down to. I don't want to feel bad about myself. And then there's somebody who's just a child, and they just talk like a child. And so, look at the direction, right? Where does the lesson of humility come from? Look at the second bullet. It comes only by a prolonged and bitter struggle against your own ego. That's the lesson on humility. It's a fight against me, my own ego. Do people have egos? Do you guys have egos? No one goes, no. That's fantastic. That's true, actually. And neither do I, just the two of us. But the rest of you, right, and Satan, and everybody else really on earth, right? Because when we look at the sins, all the sins are the same sin. There's only one sin. It's the self. Every sin is the same sin. You go back and you trace it, and it's just pride, self, ego, lack of humility. Every time you get upset, why are you upset? Think about it. Every time you've ever been upset in your life, why are you upset? Someone poked at your ego. They talked to you in a way they shouldn't talk to you. They didn't treat you the right way. They didn't give you the respect you deserved. They didn't, they weren't fair to you. Someone poked your ego, and you didn't like it. Every time, right? And the reason there's only one sin is because that's the sin that who fell from? Satan. That's the sin. And so if I want to battle this sin, the sin, it's a prolonged battle against me. And that's what the book, The Grain of Wheat, is about, right? Because Jesus said, unless the grain of wheat falls and what? Dies, it shall produce no fruit. So there has to be death. Death to what? Death to me. Which part of me? Old me. The old man. The old Adam. That's the part that has to die. That's what Christianity is. And if anyone tells you it's different than that, they're mistaken. They haven't read their gospel, right? It's all about death to the self. It's that battle against me. Everything we do in the church is that. Right? And he continues, the lesson of purity cannot be taught by informing spiritual children of lofty ideals or by describing historical examples or by training them in rules or techniques. Right? Telling a bunch of people about stories of pure people and saying, look how pure she was, you should be like her. Look how pure he was, you should be like him. It's not going to work. Rather, it comes first and foremost through the servant's willingness to scrub out the spots in his children's lives. A mother cannot tolerate seeing her child covered in filth. Therefore, she patiently and persistently cleans her child on a daily basis. Hi, Abby. How you doing? There's one acrylos, in case you don't know. So once again, he even goes back to the lesson of purity being one that comes through my own struggle, my own battle. The talk is on service, how to serve. You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet, for I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Right? What do we call the Holy Thursday? There's a name for it. There's a Western name. We call it Maundy Thursdays. Anyone ever heard this term before? Maundy Thursday. Where does the word Maundy come from? It comes from the word mandate. right? To order, because that is the day Christ ordered them. And he ordered them to do as I do. First thing he did, wash the feet. Second thing he did, do this in remembrance of me, the communion, right? So that was the day he told them to do two things, right? And it's a special day. Why is it a special day? Why is Maundy Thursday a special day? Because it's the day before the crucifixion, right? And so we all know, like, if we're all gathered on someone's deathbed and we know this is their last day on earth, whatever they say that day, that's a special thing, right? And Christ knew this was my last day on earth. This was my last day with my disciples. What I'm going to tell them is really important. So I'm going to show them the two most important things to do. Wash each other's feet and communion. And he put them, those are the two biggies that he said, this is the last thing I'm going to tell you before I go. Right? And so this is ultimately the idea of service. I'll tell you guys a story that kind of highlights all of this. One time, one of the servants wanted to talk about this story, the washing of the feet. And so how did he want to do it? He could have just stood up there and told his story and did his thing. But instead, back then, this was in Egypt. I heard the story from an Egyptian priest. Back then, kids wore leather shoes, right? Either brown or black, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but there's a shoe polish thing, right, that you can buy, and it's either brown or black. Those are the two colors you get. And so this servant, and it's all a boys' class, instead of talking about the lesson, he gets down on all fours, which, for uncle to get down on all fours is already a sight, right? If I got down on all fours in front of you right now and started scrubbing your shoes, it would be uncomfortable, right? You'd be like, no, please, Archie, stop, right? And if I sat there from one to the next, and he got the brown polish for the brown shoes and the black polish for the black shoes, and he sat there for 45 minutes and cleaned every kid's shoe. Didn't say a word. Imagine the impact, right? And then you add the one piece to it, right, where you say, and that's just a guy. That's just uncle. That's just Archie. That's just the Pope. Right? You guys know this tradition in the church. It's a very beautiful tradition, right? We wash the feet how many times over the course of the year? 3 times, right? 3 times there's a washing of the feet in the church, right? Maundy Thursday, Feast of the Apostles, and the Epiphany. And the tradition of the church is that the highest rank in the church is the one who does it. So if the Pope is there, he does it. Why? Because the church wants to teach everyone that this is the model. Christ did it. So now when I see Uncle sit there and scrub my shoes in total silence, every kid's like, what is this guy doing? And then you take the extra twist is, that's just a guy, but Christ did this. You want to talk about humility? You want to talk about a lesson? There's the lesson, right? And it isn't one of lofty words and a bunch of quotes and a bunch of, well thought out, prearranged words, as Abuna Metta says. It's different, right? And this is how Christ impacted his disciples. This is how he discipled them. He said, I'm going to show you what it means. And by the way, this is like a gross job, right? And in fact, in the servant world, the lowest servant did this job. Okay, love, the ultimate criterion of Christian service. Any criterion used to measure our service other than love is a merely human measure. This is such an important concept. Why? Because in service, sometimes we say dumb things like, oh, he's a good servant and he's a bad servant. And what makes a good servant and a bad servant? Well, his class has lots of kids and they like him, and his class has few kids, or whatever. Or he's very active, or he's a good speaker, or he's a good singer, or he's a good whatever he is. And that's just the wrong measure. How do you measure service? And this is the beauty of service, is you can't be a bad servant. You can't be a bad servant. As long as you have what? It says it on the board, on the screen. Love. That's the only measure. If you have love, you're automatically good at this. you automatically win. You automatically get 5 stars. And that's just the way it works. That's how God looks at our service. It isn't how much you do, it's how much love you put into what you do. Mother Teresa said that. It isn't the amount of stuff you do, the amount of running around, the amount of people who know about you, the amount of notoriety, the amount of parents that recognize you, or the amount of kids who love you. No. It's the amount of love you put into it. And what does the word love mean? Sacrifice. Right? And the ultimate model of love is always what? The cross. Sacrifice. That's love. Right? And so when your kids see you sacrificing, there's nothing left to teach. There's nothing left to say. They feel it, right? And you all know, you've all been to church a few times now. You all know who at church loves you and who doesn't, don't you? You can tell who's fake and who isn't, right? You can tell when that one person smiles and hugs you and you're like, yeah, that's fake. And then there's that one person, that uncle, tant, whatever, cutie, teta, that just loves on you, right? And she doesn't have to speak English. And you can tell she loves you, right? And those are the people that impact your lives. Right? Love is the measure. So the difference in a good Sunday school servant or any servant at all isn't how successful or how eloquent or how whatever. There's only one measure. So you can't be bad at this. You can't say, well, I'm not really good with speaking. I'm not really good with organization. I'm not really, who cares? Nobody cares. No one's listening to your lessons anyway. Remember at the end of the lesson, what do? They go running out the door. What they do feel is that this person cares about me. And when I got a problem, I know who I'm going to. That guy or her. And that's really all you can be as a servant. By offering yourself in the service, you make yourself available. And if you look at what Jesus did in his life on earth, 3.5 years, he made himself available. That's what he did. He put himself out there and he said, I'm here. If you need me, I'm here. And then often you'd see the disciples, and this really gets fleshed out when you watch the Chosen, but the disciples wouldn't know where he was, or they'd see him leaving and serving for long hours, making himself available to everyone who needed him. That's service. That's love. That's what it's all about. Not prearranged words, not saying the right things, not necessarily, being in the right places or rubbing elbows with the right people. That's just distraction, right? And we see this in the story of Mary and Martha, right? Mary, she's sitting there at the feet of Jesus, not doing any work. And Martha, serving, running around, making kach, making tea, making shay, right? Doing all the things she needs to do, and Mary's not serving. And Christ says, yeah, she's doing the right thing. She picked the better path. She's just sitting at my feet, listening. So the only 3 drivers of service that he says are love of God, love of those served, and love of the church. And that's it, in that order. Okay, so I'll talk about the distortions of love, and then we can take questions. There are many factors that contribute to the distortion of Christian love. So he said that the only motivation for service is what? Love. Anything you do, no matter what it is. You want to, I remember one time I came to church, I was like 12 years old, or maybe 13 years old. And I came to church like on a Tuesday night for some reason. And I see this woman there, and she's actually a reasonably well-off woman, like not, one of the tons, with prestige in the church. And she's mopping the floors of the church on a Tuesday night at like 9 p.m. And the way she's mopping them isn't the way, like we use a mop with a stick. She was doing it the old-fashioned Egyptian way. She takes a towel, she puts it in a bucket of soapy water, and she hunches over, and and she uses her back and she just wipes the floor with her hands. And I just saw her, and she didn't see me see her. And I was just blown away by this. Like, this is love, right? She wants to sacrifice for the church. And it was such a powerful thing. And then you realize, like, the real saints of the church aren't the people in the front. They're not the people you think are the saints. People driving the whole thing, their prayers that are just carrying the church, are those old people in the corners that nobody knows exist. And they're the ones they're keeping the whole service alive. They're keeping Abuna alive. They're keeping the servants alive. Their prayers are sustaining the whole thing. That's the love. The desire for monetary gain or personal advancement and so on. But the most dangerous factor is a certainty of one's personal godliness. When service becomes merely a showcase for one's own piety, self-righteousness begins to grow in the place of holy love. What does this come back to? What we talked about earlier. Ego. And as soon as you let your ego get ahead of you, you're done. Right? The service will destroy you. But don't worry about it. God will destroy your service first to protect you from yourself. Because once your ego gets ahead of you, God has to take you down. And he will. So don't you worry about it. So this is the issue with the ego. Right? And look at how he says it. The most dangerous factor is one's personal godliness. When service becomes a showcase for one's own piety. When the thought enters my head, I want people to think of me as, name the thing. You are down the wrong path. Why are you down the wrong path? Because who am I not staring at right now? God. I'm looking at me. I'm thinking about what he thinks about me. What is he going to say? What are people going to say? And unfortunately, you know this better than I do. You know how much this creeps into the service, right? You know how many parents want their kids to be in I'dad Khidmah, right? Servant prep. Get in there. Be a servant. Why? So I can look good. And you can look good. And our family looks good. And people think we're good. Anyone heard God in that sentence anywhere? That service has to fail. And eventually it does. So many people come into the service, and so many people leave the service. Right? I'm an old man, 54 yesterday. Saw so many people come into the service, and so many people leave the service. And especially when the service comes in and it's self-focused, God can't let it last. It's just too dangerous on the person. And so he talks about this. Excessive concerns with results. The servant experiences joy in times of success, but despair in times of failure. That's a symptom of a bigger problem, right? When there's no result. And you'll hear this all the time. I did all this work and nobody showed up. I did all this thing and no one appreciated me. I did all this work and people just criticized what I did. We got a problem. You seem to not be happy with the fact that you just poured out love and that's all you wanted to do. You wanted results. And results are for whom? They're for me, right? I remember my father in confession used to tell me, he says, God is not going to let you see the fruit of your work. He won't let you see it because he loves you too much. He's going to protect you from that. So you'll never see what you did. You'll never see what you planted. Right? And you guys will experience the same thing. How many of you have been affected by somebody deeply and not told them? And they die and you don't ever tell them. Teachers, Sunday school teachers, people at school, people at work. People have affected you and you just never told them. That's okay. They don't need to know. That's not why they did it. If they did it because I want a card at Christmas and an email and a text on my birthday, they did it for the wrong reason. God's going to protect them by making you forget over and over. Yeah, one of these days I need to tell that Sunday school servant what they meant to me. And I just never did, and now I'm at their funeral. That's okay. So when we start getting concerned with results and how things look, first problem. I'll tell you a story. There was a priest, he was an Eastern Orthodox priest, and he was assigned a particular community. So, sometimes they have a different model. Sometimes they'll just place a church into a community and they'll say, go, be the community church of that community. So he sets up this Bible study on a Friday night. He prepares all week long. He sets out flyers. He goes door to door. He starts advertising. He starts telling everyone in the neighborhood, hey, I'm the priest. I'm down the street. Please come to this Bible study I'm doing on Friday night. He does all this work. He opens the doors. He puts up balloons, grand opening. He's got this amazing Bible study prepared. And then he opens the doors at 7 p.m., rolls around, and how many people show up? Nobody. So what does he do next? Room is empty. The whole hall is empty, full of chairs. He gives the talk anyway to nobody. And he delivers his talk. He says, you know what? This talk is to God. I serve God. And that's what I'm going to do. Next week, he advertises, he, kicks down the tires, he's running down all the leads, he's doing everything he can. Who shows up? Nobody shows up. And he prepares for hours this amazing talk. And he gives it anyway. Because he's like, I'm not serving people, I'm serving God. And he continues to do this until his church becomes this, as you can imagine, vibrant, center of the community that everybody comes to, and everyone loves this church and what they do, and their relationship with God as a result of it. It's not about the results. It's not about how many people came. It's about the love I put in to whoever came. And when that person, I'm sitting in front of somebody and I'm talking, or I'm talking one-on-one, I hope you guys have experienced this. When you sit with someone who's saintly and you're talking to them, you feel like you're the only human being on earth. They just look right at you, no one else. And you just feel like it's just me. They're not like looking around, what's a better deal, who else can I talk to, looking past you, checking their phone, checking their watch, checking whatever. No. It's just very focused, right? And that's the way when you really serve God, that person, whoever that dumb kid, high schooler, undergrad, whoever is in front of you, that's the most important human on the face of the earth. That's the person that God's put in front of me right now. And that's the person I will serve with my attention and with my love and with my eye contact and with my concern and with my listening to every word they say and feel what they feel and think about what they're saying. Second, excessive attention paid to the administration and minute details of service more than to the souls being served. This results in the sacrifice of souls to maintain the order of the system. When we become administrators, it's always dangerous. As clergy, we can't become administrators. As servants, we can't become administrators. We have to be servants of souls. That's the focus, the people. Once you're too concerned about the system and maintaining order and, there's a checks and balances and there's a this and the that, we lose sight. Number 3, a lack of growth of love among those served. An extension of this is an excessive attachment to the servant rather than to God. As soon as a servant, you start wanting the kids to like you, you have a problem. Because that's what, again, the only problem there is. Ego. I want people to talk good about me. I want people to say, oh, that guy's great, or she's great, or she's wonderful. And then I hear that, someone doesn't like me. I'm like, why not?
You know how much I do for that class? Those jerks. And so once I want the kids attached to me, then it's an ego thing, right? And my job always is to attach them to God, not to myself, right? Otherwise, that's my pride getting in the way. And the way I do that is that they have to see God in me, but that's not why I do it, right? Because if I say something that sounds pious, like I want people to see Christ in me, right? And some people say that at school, like I want to go on Chapman's College campus and I want people to see Christ in me. Careful. There's a lot of me in that sentence, right? There's a lot of me in that sentence. So be careful these pious sounding things that are just camouflaged ways of me, right? I want to show them love and I want to forgive them, and because I want them to know that, that I'm a Christian and I want them to see how good God is. And how about you do it for God? How about you just do it out of love? How about you just do it because it's the right thing? How about you do it when no one notices and no one cares? And in fact, after you do it, they turn on you. And then they say crap about you. And then they hurt you. Does that happen? Yeah, have you read any saint story ever? That's how they end. In fact, even Jesus ended that way, didn't it? Do a lot of nice things for 3.5 years and then they kill you and cuss you out and say you're a demon, chief of demons. Right? That's how the story ends. Every saint story ends the same way. Live a really good life, do really good things, and then people attack you. No different for us. Right? So the gospel doesn't teach us that we're going to be loved. That's not part of being a Christian. The gospel teaches us that we are to love sacrificially. And I don't know what I'm going to get back. In fact, usually I don't get good things back. 9 times out of 10, I don't get good things back. That's okay. Right? Do you guys remember a story? I hope you do. There were 10 lepers. And Jesus healed all 10 lepers. And then something happened. Who remembers the rest of the story? Good. One came back to thank him. Right? And he said, where's everybody else? But here's the point. When I first read this story, and someone told it to me in Sunday school, they said, you see how important it is to thank God? Out of 10 people, only one came back to thank God. You should always thank God. Is that the point of the story? I don't think that's the point of the story. I think the point of the story is Jesus healed 10 people knowing that what? 90% of them would not thank him. But what? He did it anyway. So when we do good, we don't do good because we're going to get a thank you. Christ did it knowing that 90% don't thank you after you help them. And that's about right, by the way. You guys have, about 90% of the people you help don't thank you. That's about right. So when that happens, you should think, good, I'm on the right track, right? If 70% don't thank you, like you're doing something wrong. Like, why are 30% of people thanking you? What's going on? It's freaking me out. Stop, right? I like a nice 10%, 1 out of 10 thank me, the rest cuss me out. Good numbers, right? So what's Christ teaching us? Do good anyway, right? The rain falls on the wicked and the just, the same. The sun shines on the evil and the good, the same. God throws seeds on 75% of the soil that isn't going to work, but he throws them anyway, right? This is our God. And by extension, if I'm the image and likeness of him, I do good anyway, regardless of what I'm going to get back. That's service. And it's a Christ-based approach. It's what he did. Okay, I'll stop now. Does anybody have any questions or comments, criticisms, complaints, conundrums, qualms? Yes, sir.
Shouldn't you want the people you're serving to trust you and in a sense like you, Like, you can't be like just annoying to them.
Well, I seem to be annoying. No, I definitely agree. People, so from a trust perspective, as a servant, I'll say people should know with absolute confidence that you will not break their trust. Like, that should be a hallmark. Like, no matter what happens, this person isn't going to talk about me or tell anybody what I just told them. That's not just clergy. That should be all of us. And unfortunately, and I'll say this, our culture isn't like that. Our culture is very loose-lipped, gossipy. People's privacy is not important. Secrets are not held. People love to talk about other people, say stuff they shouldn't say. And it's stunning to me that people would do that. St. John Chrysostom has this saying where he says, during the fast, you don't eat the flesh of chicken and fish, but you eat the flesh of your neighbor with gossip, right? So that should always be, so you should always be trusted as a servant, for sure. But the goal, my objective isn't for you to like me, right? My objective is I do what's right before God, right? I only serve God. I don't serve a man. I don't serve a priest. I don't serve a bishop. I don't serve the Pope. I don't serve the kids. I serve God first and foremost, right? So what I do before him, not before anyone else, right? I don't do this, okay, they told me not to tell, but I'm going to tell you. No, it's not right, So yeah, so from that perspective, you definitely want people to trust you and to love you, but that shouldn't be my objective, but that's probably going to be an outcome. But it may not be the outcome. It may be I show you a lot of love, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and then you turn on me. Happens. Or, I go feed someone homeless and then they cuss me out and drop some F-bombs on me. It's happened to me a couple times, right? That's okay. I'm not doing it really for you. And that's what Jesus said, right? Whatever you've done to the least of these, my brethren, you've done to me. So you treat everybody the way, as if it's Christ. And how would I treat if Christ was standing before me right now? And if you do that, usually good things happen, but that's not what I'm waiting for. And occasionally, a bad thing will happen. And that's okay too. It's not going to affect me because I did what I did out of love. And I'm proud, and I'll stick by that every time. Yes?
You were saying earlier, if you analyze why you're upset at something, a lot of times it goes back to your pride and your ego. If you realize that and you don't want to feel that way, how do you combat that?
What do you mean you don't want to feel that way?
You realize, okay, I'm upset because of my pride. Why do I feel so highly of myself? Why do I think that I deserve this or I'm entitled to this?
Yeah. Yeah, don't do that. I think the first step is the first step and the big step is recognizing that, right? That's huge, by the way, because I can't tell you, somebody will be talking to me, a friend, and I'll be like, sounds like your ego is getting in the way. And they'd be like, what? No, huh, blah, right? And they come right back at me and they're like, you know what, your ego's in the way. And I'm like, okay, here we go, right? So, so those are always fun too. But so that's great that you recognize it, right? So I think that's the first part. And just, you sit with yourself and you say, okay, and you have that introspection time, quiet time. And once you're there, you can process it, right? You can move forward and you can at least recognize that's what's happening. And then you ask God to fix it, right? You say, Lord, make me not suck. Right? And this is why when you hear someone say, well, I don't even know what I would confess. you're like, holy moly, right? Like, that's crazy talk to me. Like, you can't find anything, like, oh, you didn't kill anybody, that's the best you got? So, Abu Nabshoy Kamil, the Saint Abu Nabshoy Kamil, not Saint Marina, Abu Nabshoy Kamil, he used to have this saying. He'd say, sometimes you look at your garment and you, in a dark room, and you don't see any spots. And then as you get a little closer to the light, you see some spots and you clean them. And then you're like, well, I look clean. And then you get a little closer to the light and you see more spots that you hadn't noticed, and you clean them. And the closer you get to the light, the more spots you see. And, this is why the saints cried, right? Because they saw spots. And they saw God's love despite their spots. And that's very emotional and powerful. So it's a function of getting closer to the light that you see these things. So it's a gift that you can see that in yourself. That's a beautiful thing, right? It's okay that there's ugliness there, right? And nobody likes to see their own ugliness. Take it from me. But at least you see it, right? And then I can start to work on it, and I can process it. And then the next time it happens, I'm like, okay, there it goes again. Why am I upset? Yeah, there it is. Okay. And next, after 10 of these, you can go, hey, look, I'm sorry. I snapped at you. That was just, me getting in the way of me, right? And then the apologies start to come, and the forgiveness starts to come, and the love starts to come. And then what eventually starts to happen is the part of you that keeps flaring up. Remember we talked about the grain of wheat has to die. That's the old man. That's the old Adam, right? And eventually we kill those parts of us. There's a famous saying on one of the monasteries in Mount Athos. I say this all the time. It says, if you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. Has anyone ever heard this before? No one's ever heard this? If you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. And so the key is to die before you die. Dying to that ego part, right? And so that's the key. Is it's kind of like if you took a sharp thing and you poked me, I would say ouch, right? But if that part of skin is dead and you poked it, I wouldn't feel it, right? If I had paralysis, for example. And so that's the goal, right? Is to be dead so that when people poke, you actually don't even feel it, right? You don't even recognize it as a slam on your ego. You're just like, oh, well, they're having a hard day, or, they have a point. Maybe I should have said that. There's no ego reaction. But it's a lot of work, and it's very painful. It's very hard. And you'll struggle with it the rest of your life. But it's okay. You'll die soon enough, and then it'll be over. Uplifting, anyone? Yes?
I kind of want to challenge you because I just don't understand. I as a servant, so I wish we could say we can change the way we do it. We can't. Or maybe, I don't want to be unmotivated, but as a servant, how would you tell us to give us, I have to give a lesson this Saturday per se, and it's out of the curriculum. How can I, besides obviously I agree we should teach by showing them how do I give that lesson without just blurting, what we were talking about in the beginning, and
so I actually gave a talk on this. I called it superficiality of the service, and so if you want, you can text me and I'll send it to you. But one of the ways that I find very helpful to do this is by living the lesson first that week. So, there's the old, I got to do you even said it the way you said it, I have to give the lesson on Saturday, right? So, right off the bat, okay? And so I can prepare that Saturday morning, or on the way to church. I can read it really quick. Okay, I know that. Okay, I can do this. That's option one. Option two is I think about and I prepare that talk for the week, right? The curriculum, by the way, the app or whatever we're doing these days, that's not meant to be read. That's a guideline, right? And it can be supplemented, augmented by my own reflections, my own stories, lives of saints that aren't in the curriculum thing. So what I would suggest you do is spend the week thinking about that lesson, right? And rehearsing it and practicing what you would say and how you would say it, and put a lot of care and thought into that talk. And then ask myself, am I living this talk? Whatever it is, humility, whatever it is, right? Confession, whatever the thing. And ask yourself the hard questions, right? It's much easier not to. Just going to give it to you right now. It's much easier to get up there and you can kill it. You can give a great talk, everyone claps and throws confetti or whatever, right? And I haven't lived any of the things I've said. And if I haven't lived any of the things I said, then it's not effective. And if I don't care it's not effective, then I have another issue. Like, I just got to do this thing. And then you ask yourself, if I just got to do this thing, why am I doing this thing? Is my heart even in it? Is this really the right service for me? Maybe I need to ask myself, why isn't my heart into this? And the answer usually is, where's my life with God right now? Right? Where's my own spiritual life? And this is always a danger, for the priests, the people who give talks, the servants, all of you guys is, I do this all the time. I'll read a great quote that cuts to the heart, and I'll think, oh, I should use this in a talk, instead of letting it cut me to the heart, right? I protect myself from the quote by faking it and saying, I'll use it in service. Sounds godly, sounds good, right? But I'm keeping myself from letting this affect me. I'm insulating it, like a clam does with a piece of dust and makes a pearl, right? So I'm insulating myself from the quote, and I won't let it affect me by saying I'm going to use it in a talk. Right? When I first, it wasn't this book, it was another one of Bunametta's books. He said, the problem with the servant, this was the first chapter, is this book. It's the first chapter, the first sentence, and the first page. The problem with the servant today is that he wants to see fruit before God does. That's what Abunametta said in the first page of this book. And I picked up that book, I read that, and I couldn't finish. I stopped there. That's why I still have it memorized, right? I just hit me like a ton. I'm like, holy moly, this guy's talking to me. And I just closed the book, and I spent 3 weeks thinking about that sentence. It's one of the few times I let the quote, affect me. Usually I just do what I did here, cut and paste, put it on a PowerPoint slide, zing it out. How'd I do with your challenge?
Yeah.
Did okay? All right, that's
It's
good.
like complicated.
Could have been better, I know. Good? Any other questions, thoughts? You can ask. I won't bite. No? All right. Glory be to God forever. Amen.